Hello, I'm Chris Flisher, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel, an intelligent, lively discussion on astrology, art, and adventure. Timing is everything, and as the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed. Join me as I explore the current planetary alignments and offer insights for coping with change. Educational, informative, enlightening, the Turning of the Wheel is a welcome pause in your daily swirl of constant change. Through intelligent discourse, inspired guests, and educational segments, I will help to enlighten your knowledge of astrology and guide you to accept change as the great wheel of life turns. Call in with your questions and speak with some of the greatest visionaries in the time-tested practice of astrology. Turning of the Wheel, Astrology, Art, and Adventure with Chris Flisher, each Thursday, live, 6 p.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. Pacific on Contact Talk Radio.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. This is a show about astrology, art, and spiritual adventure. And next week, you'll be hearing that same intro that you just heard, but it'll be saying live Saturday, 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific. That's right, folks. I am moving to Saturdays next week, and April the 3rd will be my first show on the weekends. I'm trying it out on the weekends to see if it helps people listen, new audience perhaps. My shows will always be on iTunes, so you don't have to worry about that. They'll always be free there. They'll always be downloadable from my website as well, www.chrisflisher.com. And so they'll always be there. And I always have a Facebook page and a Facebook fan page I'll have there soon, which will help support all this as well. And I'll let you all know what's going on. But as of next Saturday, I will be on April 3rd. I'll be on 11 a.m. Eastern, 8 a.m. Pacific, and hopefully you folks that are home on those days will crank up your computers and tune into me, or I'll be listening to you on the Seattle airwaves live out there as well. So that'll be a good experience, I think. I have this is, as you know, this is a listener-supported radio station. So I was listening to the radio today, and I heard, I was listening to one of the public broadcast stations out there and how they always go through their annual fund drivers, and they have a lot of time where they're talking, and they have special programming during those weeks and stuff like that. I am just a solo guy. I don't have all the resources to have all that special stuff happening, but I do my best to get good guests on and to keep you all informed about the current planetary alignments and what's going on with the world of astrology. We are in a very intense time with astrology, and it's interesting that it's so prevalent right now. I think that there's a lot of interesting things that have pointed to the validity of astrology as of late. Mainly the concepts of timing and placement and what we're seeing with regard to the world order right now. We are going through a massive reorganization that's going to continue for several years now with regard to organization of I think it's going to be a massive redistribution of resources, which is long overdue. You know, sort of the trickle-down economy that was put in place by years ago, back in the 1980s, by the administration, and I'm not going to mention any names. I think we all know who that was. Have really not worked well, and for the last 25 years or so, the middleman has taken it. Has taken us down the tubes. And so trickle-down economy does not work, but bubble-up economy does work, because I think that if all of us got money during this restructure, I certainly would have gone out and bought stuff. I would have invested in more education. I would have bought books. I would have bought TVs. Who knows what we all would have bought, but I think that the economy would have been stimulated. But my point is that over the next few months and next few years, we're going through this dramatic shift with regard to the structure of the United States and with the New World Order at the same time. So this is all what's considered to be Pluto in Capricorn. Pluto is Capricorn is an Earth-based cardinal sign. And coming up this summer, we have what's known as a Grand Cross happening right around the last week of July, first week of August. But it's going to be the time between now and then where we will begin to feel this pressure. And it really bodes well. I think I'm being optimistic about this change. I think it bodes well for a positive change. I think the pendulum is going to swing so that the middle class finally gets some traction and is allowed to get some tax breaks, and things begin to move again. So I'm certainly optimistic about that. But today we're going to be talking about and I also wanted to let you know before I introduce my guest, I'm always available for readings. I was on the the web today, and I saw that there was some sort of a software scam out there that talks about astrology readings and stuff like that. And I want you all to know that my site is completely safe. It's guarded like Fort Knox. It's got everything is completely safe. And so if you do contact me for readings, I'm always available. My website is www.chrisflisher.com, and you simply click on the astrological readings in the navigational bar, and there's a PayPal button there, and you can click for a reading. I do 20-minute readings, which are an economical way to get through these tough times, and I also do much longer readings. So if you are interested in that, there's a great deal of information that comes out of the astrology chart. If you're going through a difficult time, if you're having a difficult time with your work, with your relationships, your career, money, where you're going, your soul's purpose, all those answers are really, really obvious in the astrology chart. So I encourage you to look into that and see what you can find out. My guest today is Dietrich Pessin, and she has written a wonderful book called Lunar Shadows 3. It's the predictive power of moon phases and eclipses, and it's available from Amazon as well as from her site. Her website is www.lunar-shadows.com, and she's going to be joining me, and we're going to be talking about the lunar shadow. The lunar shadow is an interesting concept of astrology whereby we know that the moon has great power since it's so close to us, and we know that it's responsible for the tides. We know it's responsible for a number of different aspects. We feel its effects every day because it changes every day. About every 2.5 days, it moves on to a new sign. And so sooner or later throughout the course of the month, everyone is going to feel the effects of the moon. And my guest is a specialist and has written this wonderful book about the predictive power of the moon's phases. And I think the better we are informed about the position of the role of the moon in our charts, the better informed we will be about what we can envision coming up. So please, it's my wonderful honor to welcome Dietrich Pessin to my show today. Dietrich, are you there?
Hi, Chris. I am.
Hey, how are you?
I'm fine, thank you.
I guess you must have a good moon phase. You sound very bubbly.
Yes. It's. I'm happy to be on your show. This is a great treat, and I'm thrilled to talk about the moon phases and the work in my book. We just had a really powerful moon phase on Tuesday. That was a first quarter moon at almost 3 degrees of Cancer. And what my job is to hunt down those numbers, those degrees, where a moon phase occurs and find where it is connected to other points in time.
And points in time or points in the chart?
Is that I discover all of these linkages to storylines. People will call me up with problems and stories and want to know how things are going to work out. Mm-hmm. And I found this 9-month link between moon phases. But let me just tell you first a little bit, or share with you. Everybody knows what moon phases are. We see them on our calendar. Any calendar is going to show us those 4 moon phases in any given month: the new moon, the first quarter moon, the full moon, and the last quarter moon. And each moon phase is, in a month, appears as though they all belong together. And what I discovered was that there is actually a link to a moon phase that happened this week, say, for instance, on Tuesday when we had that first quarter, and to a date going back 9 months ago. And what's going to be really exciting is that there's a date coming up in 9 months when there's going to be a lunar eclipse near the same degree. And
it'll be the same degree of Cancer? It'll be 3 degrees of Cancer?
It actually will be just over the line into the sign of Gemini. It'll be at 29 degrees of Gemini.
29.
It's related. It's called a moon. It's one of the 4 moon phases in a moon family.
Mm-hmm.
So
the moon family refers to the 4 phases.
It refers to the 4 phases, but a family is separated by a 9-month cycle called the lunar gestation cycle, much like the human gestation cycle.
I see. Okay. That makes sense, yeah.
So this lunar gestation cycle helps to keep track of the events and human affairs, the things that we do, what the next major event regarding this topic might be, when does it all conclude, when do you reap the rewards for your efforts, all that sort of thing is tied into this moon family. And the moon family is an incredible predictive tool.
So let me ask you a question, Dietrich, if I could interrupt you. If a person has a significant placement of a moon in their chart and there's an eclipse in that particular place, would they wait that 9 months in order to see that manifest?
Well, they might. If there's an eclipse on their moon, they're probably experiencing an enormous amount of emotional change, or they might be either thinking of or in the process of moving. Or there may be matters about their mom or their close friends or their children, babies. Your babies are the moon. And that, it would happen once every 19 years. So you can look back. And actually there's 9.5 years ago, there would be a lunar eclipse near the same point, which will activate your moon. You may have stories also that are about your, extreme emotional condition, your mom, your home, all those things I just mentioned.
Yeah. Those are very valid because I think that the connection, when you begin to, when you said 9.5 years, it immediately clicked in my head what happened to me 9.5 years ago. And I think that anybody who's a parent, when they have a child who's 17, 18, 19 in that era, that would be a significant change because typically they move on and go to college and your whole, your home arena sort of changes. Your home environment changes. Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And that 19 years, when you're having a repeat of your birth energy, a repeat of it's called the metonic cycle,
right.
METONIC. It's a cycle when all of the moon phases repeat in their identical order every 19 years. So when you're born, there's a set of moon phases on the calendar month. If you pick up a calendar that goes back to when you were born and you look at all those moon phases and you'll see them repeat when you're 19, the same ones in the same place. It's interesting. And then at 38 and then 19 years after that. And it goes on for 57 to 76 years. This will go on, this repeat.
So is it safe to say that if we look back 19 years, we would see similar types of events that we would witness now? Is that the correlation? Mm-hmm.
Yes. I mean, I've had someone call and say, I don't know what's going on. This was in a time when everybody wasn't losing their job. This was in a time when jobs were abundant and most people, a lot of people had jobs. And there was a fellow who called and he was distressed because his job was changing. He was out of work and couldn't find work. Mm-hmm. And it was 19 years before when he graduated college, and he was in the same situation.
Same situation.
He had chosen his field, and he couldn't find his work.
Huh. Interesting.
So, yes, those things very often. It doesn't always mean that you'll be out of a job every 19 years. It may mean that you have a career startup that's different. You go on a career
Yes, yeah. Well, so it's a similar theme, or is it always the same themes? I mean, if you did have a theme at the time, in other words, if you got married 19 years ago, it doesn't mean you're going to get married again in 19 years, unless, of course, your relationship doesn't work out. So it's more the theme, perhaps it may have to do with the relationship or the career, as you mentioned. Correct? It's more of the overall. Okay, good. I got it.
Yeah, it may mean that. I don't know, maybe your child got married when you were 38, something like that, or 9.5 years after that. Those in-between times, you have 19 years apart, and then those in-between times of 9.5 years that'll set off similar energies. And the topics, of course, are different because Pluto's in a different sign now. And Uranus and Jupiter and, all the planets are arranged differently. But the eclipse is still setting off those core energies that you were born with.
I see. So the interesting thing is that depending upon the players that you just mentioned, at the time that the 19 happens, the manifestation of that could be significantly different. I mean, it could indicate that there's a great burst of optimism, as well as a recurring theme of something that happened. Like you mentioned, someone not having a job. I mean, it could also mean that they get a brand new job that's better than the other, or, you know, there's always a sense of, it's more a matter of a reflection of the fact that the change is going to be evident again at that time.
Right. I mean, it could mean you buy the company.
Yeah, there you go.
You know, it doesn't have to mean
why not
something,
think big? Yeah, I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, you know, it could very well mean something more positive. So, you know, you have to take a look and use use your imagination, so to speak, or expand your concept of what, say, relationship themes may be like. You
right,
know, for
exactly.
some people, instead of remarrying, I've certainly seen people redo their vows at that 19-year interval.
I think the concept
plus,
of
like say at 38 years later or something like that.
Yeah.
But they could also do something different where they are more in touch with one another after, running a busy life and being involved with life in separate directions, that they come together in a different, more meaningful way.
There's not the distractions, right? Especially as a couple growing up with children, there's not the distractions of the children. The children typically are out of the house and they're on their own, and then it gives them time to sort of refocus back on that. And I think that the important characteristic that you're making here is not to be the granularity of what happens at the time of the 19 years is dependent upon the layout of the other, the landscape of the universe at the time, where Uranus is and Jupiter and all the other planets that are part of our charts, but that the themes are recurring. That's what's most important.
Right. And we have an eclipse coming up this summer. We had one just in January, on January 15, and it was in the sign of Capricorn, which is about big business, big government. We can certainly see how that's playing out. And then this summer, it's going to be in the sensitive sign of the home, Cancer. And that is going to put the focus on family, on our security, our sense of safety, creating that nest, babies, home and family, all those sorts of things are.
Yeah, now you're talking about the eclipse in July?
Planets in that sign of Cancer. Anywhere in the sign of Cancer, really, if it's not too close or if it is very close, you'll find that that eclipse is activating those planets, and then you'll notice changes in your life in regard. But your question originally was, would you find that you'll find out what the eclipse means 9 months later? You very well could. And then 9 months after that, it may all come to a head of some sort, or come out for full exposure. Like, let's say, for instance, you meet somebody and fall madly in love. Now, that summertime eclipse kicks in as early as April, and the eclipse is July 11th, so we back it up 3 months, so that would be around April 11th. Actually, there's a new moon in the month of April. You would just tag that point for our stories to change. And this is when we're working on that new energy. We're letting go of the old stuff that we've been under the canopy of this Capricorn eclipse from January. And come April, we enter into this new eclipse that's coming up. And let's say you meet someone wonderful within the next 3 months. And then 9 months after, you come to that point where you're going to make a decision about how you're going to deal with your relationship. Do you like each other enough to continue on? Might you talk about or think about getting married? Or maybe not so much about getting married, or maybe about living together, trying it out. And then 9 months after that, which would be a year and a half after the eclipse, might be actually when the wedding occurs, or there's some major pivot or change and decision point that kind of goes in the public in a way.
Yes, I can see that.
At the last quarter moon phase, which would then be 2.25 years after a solar eclipse, you might then have something where, I don't know, maybe you'll have a baby, something like that, where things move along, the story moves along, the drama moves along. Here's a story that began. We're all going to remember this. This was the election of the year 2000, and on December 12th, it was decided by the Supreme Court, Gore versus Bush, and we know what the outcome was. And then 9 months later, September 11th, 2001, the U.S. was attacked. Then 9 months after that was June 2002, when it became clear that the Bush administration was pressing its case to the UK to invade Iraq. Then, 9 months later, which would be March of 2003, the U.S. did, in fact, invade Iraq. Yet another 9 months occurred when Saddam Hussein was pulled out of a rabbit hole.
Oh, and wow, that is amazing.
Yeah, 9 months after that, which was the third anniversary of when they captured him, Saddam Hussein was hanged. So we see how that happens. That happened 6 times, 6 9-month intervals.
Now, were they triggered by an eclipse?
The original one, there was an eclipse there in the year 2000 in the sign. Let me find where that was. That was the forecast.
I was just curious what if there was a triggering event, and maybe it wasn't the eclipse. Perhaps it was some other Uranus or something like that may have triggered it. I think that with that sort of the upset in I know the whole the election results were very controversial and contentious at the time, and to have it come to the Supreme Court and all that was very profound with regard to U.S. history, almost an unprecedented time, in history, because, the whole shift of everything could have changed dramatically at that point. Exactly. Who knows where we would have been at this point by then.
There was an eclipse at 4 degrees of Capricorn, right at that very time. And
Capricorn is a significant player in the United States chart.
Yes. Yeah. And you know what else is really interesting about that 4 degrees of Capricorn? This year, June 26th, there will be a lunar eclipse at 4 degrees of Capricorn.
Uh-huh.
So this is that 9.5 years later. This is that point where there is some connection now.
Interesting. So 9.5 years ago, if we were to look back at that time, we would see the eclipse occurring at the same time, right?
Yeah, we would see that there was 9.5 years ago, when the Supreme Court decided that election, there was a solar eclipse at 4 Cap, and then here we are 9.5 years later, there's a lunar eclipse at 4 Capricorn, and that same Supreme Court just in January passed...
Oh, gosh, I know.
Yeah,
I know what they did.
That law that allows the money
to come from outside.
To come into the elections.
So I think that I feel, as you well know, as an astrologer, you feel the tension building towards this summer, and what we could conceivably see is as some sort of a dramatic shift with regard to how government operates. That we are marching towards that, and I tend to be on the optimistic side of that change, even though it looks pretty dramatic on paper. I am on the optimistic side of that whole change.
It is dramatic, and there are things, just to take the focus off of the eclipse for a minute and just go on to the very dramatic Saturn and Uranus opposition, especially it will happen a total of 5 times. The first time it happened is when President Obama was elected.
Right, yeah, it's phenomenal. I've spoken about this many times, and this time they're going to be joined by Jupiter will be joining Uranus, and Mars will be joining Saturn, and so that really adds a flavor to that transit that is remarkable. And then, of course, we got the square to Pluto, And then when the moon is in Cancer during that time, transiting up through the Cancer, it's going to be the Grand Cardinal Cross will happen.
Well, before that, in April, it will be the last time that pair will oppose each other in the signs of Virgo and Pisces.
I see.
So we go back.
It's late
to
degrees,
when
yeah. So they're all
happen.
late degrees, right? They're,
Right.
I mean, Uranus is at 27, and Saturn
in Virgo at 27. The point, it points right back to 1964. That's the last time those guys were opposite and in the same signs.
Mm-hmm.
Except Saturn was in Pisces and Uranus was in Virgo.
And look at what happened at that time. That was an enormous shift, yeah.
Yeah, and look at what's going on politically. It almost seems like there's a revolution about to begin. It's very these are very challenging times. And
they are challenging, but I think the referendums and the bills that are being put through have their roots that go back as far as Franklin Roosevelt. You know, some of these things were supposed to have happened back at the end of the Depression, and they never made it through because Roosevelt subsequently died before he had a chance to push some of these things through. So I find that to be fascinating because, you know, the current administration does have a certain Roosevelt flair to him and sort of this pragmatism that is about responsibility and about getting back to sort of the roots, and we strayed way off our path with, you know, conspicuous consumption and all kinds of things. So anyway, we've got to take a break now, Dietrich. We'll be right back. We'll only be gone about 2.5 minutes, folks. We're having a wonderful conversation with my guest today, Dietrich Pessin. Her book is called Lunar Shadows 3. It's the predictive power of moon phases and eclipses. And we're going to learn more in the second half of the show about how to use this tool to predict what you have coming up in your life and how to best manifest that. And, you know, as I've always said, that when you are forewarned, you are forearmed. And to know what's coming down the road is very helpful. So we're going to get into the predictive piece of that in the second half. We'll be back in about 2.5 minutes. My name is Chris Flisher. You're listening to Turning of the Wheel, and we'll see you in about 2.5 minutes.
What is your destiny? Where are you going? What is your real purpose? Do you know? Do you want to know? Of course you do. It's your duty to yourself. We are all here for a reason, and we all have great potential. Discover all of this and more with a professional astrology reading. My name is Chris Flisher, and I can help you. Discover your strengths and work on your weaknesses, and live your life to its fullest capacity. Based on your birthday, birthplace, and birth time, an authentic astrology reading will allow you to live your life to the fullest and reveal your true purpose. Only real astrology can give you real information. It is your destiny, and it is your path. Write me at chris@chrisflisher.com and book a reading today. Or call me at 978-393-1036. That's 978-393-1036. www.chrisflisher.com.
Astrology is the science of spirit, and it can serve as an invaluable aid in making the difficult choices in life and seeking truth in all the directions we choose. It holds the potential to allow each of us to evolve to our highest potential. It is the logic of the universe, the code of existence, and the pathway to true wisdom. It is our duty to draw from it the instructions for our lives and to live them to our fullest potential. As the great wheel turns, we are best prepared when we are best informed.
Hi, your host, Chris Flisher here. I've been producer and host of this podcast and radio show for the past 10 years. My goal has always been to provide enlightening, progressive, and logical discussions about where we are as a species and how we move ourselves further down the road towards our greater potential. I believe astrology provides a great tool for observing our progress and awakening our consciousness to becoming a whole, better, and more complete individuals. I have sought to invite the best contemporary guests, thought leaders, and progressive minds to discuss topics that concern us all, regardless of your beliefs. Consider making a contribution through PayPal to help keep the great wheel turning so that I can continue for the next 10 years along the same enlightened path. As always, I thank you for your support.
Did you know that you can rate this show on iTunes? The show you're listening to right now. It's true. You can leave your thoughts about the show, the topic, the guest. You can even leave a suggestion. Then, before you leave, rate the show. The hosts love hearing from you, so next time you download this show from iTunes, leave your thoughts and rate the show for the host and for others.
Welcome back to Turning of the Wheel. My name is Chris Flisher. My guest today is Dietrich Pessin, and we are discussing Lunar Shadows 3. Her book is titled Lunar Shadows 3, The Predictive Power of Moon Phases and Eclipses, and it's available on Amazon.com. Her website is www.lunar-shadows.com. And she is an astrologer who lives and works outside of Massachusetts, and is working with me today to discuss the concept of the predictive power of the lunar cycle. And the lunar cycle has a wonderful redemptive and recurring cycle to it every 19 years. And then, of course, at the halfway point of that 19 years, at the 9.5 years, we also have a similar theme. So what we're looking at is when you look at this predictive power of this, you look at where you are today, go back 9.5 years, go back 19 years, and you will probably see a similar theme. Now, when we talk about themes in astrology, we're talking about concepts so that it maybe, you said, well, I divorced my wife 19 years ago. Does that mean that my relationship is going to fall apart? It may not mean that. It's more that the theme of a relationship is present in your life. It doesn't mean that it's going to go one way or the other. It's more the concept of the presence of relationship, say in that example, that would be recurring in this time. It doesn't necessarily mean that the same bad thing is going to happen or the same good things that happen. So it's important to bear that in mind, but that the theme is there. So, Dietrich, with regard to the predictive aspects of the moon, do you refer to it what's called the transiting moon, which is where the moon is, say, in the sky today?
Yes, I do absolutely. Like I mentioned, the quarter moon that we had earlier this week, that first quarter moon, it's related to a new moon that occurred 9 months ago. So we would reflect back to that time, which would be June of 2009, have a look back then in your mind's eye, and see what is it about that particular time period that things are getting off the ground right around now. Mm-hmm. Because a new moon is when things are seeded and planted. Then a first quarter moon is when things get off the ground. But these things are more related to things 9 months ago than they are related to things a week ago.
I see.
Yeah.
So what happened back in June of 2009 would now begin to see the results of that now. We
would begin to see, liken it to a flower. So if the seed is planted at the new moon, this is when that little seedling breaks the soil and you see the green little baby seedling coming up.
Right. Okay.
And so that's that extreme amount of energy needed to break the soil is there. So we get this burst of energy. It's a very hopeful and enthusiastic time, and it's also ambitious. And then what you would do for a predictive, but to be able to predict how are things that are going on in your life now, what direction might they go in? Are they building? Are they growing? Yes, they are. They're growing because in 9 months there's going to be a full moon carrying this seed to a place where all the cards are on the table, everything's out in the open. And this one's a really big full moon. It'll be a lunar eclipse.
This will be in December? It should be December.
And that occurs at that full moon on December 21st.
And what's the degree? What's the degree of? That's right, in the solstice. What's the degree of that?
It's 29 Gemini and 20 minutes.
That's right. Okay. Mm-hmm.
So it's a hot one.
It's a hot one because it's so close to the cusp, right?
It's so close to the cusp. It triggers all of that 0 degrees of Aries stuff that you've been talking about. And,
right.
All of that 0 degrees of cardinal. So Uranus is going to be hot, and Jupiter and Saturn and Pluto, all of these hot spots will be re-triggered.
Mm-hmm. And that's at the winter solstice as well. So it's a significant time with regard to time, and I could see that being a very powerful time.
It'll be a very powerful time. So if you plan, like let's say you have, and many of us have projects, ongoing projects that you don't expect to complete in a month, and you certainly can't even imagine things like, let's say, for instance, you're launching a website now, mm-hmm. and you are waiting for it to grow and waiting for it to grow, and you're losing, your hope that anything's going to happen. You don't know whether you should stop paying for this or take it down or whatever. And I say, don't do anything. Wait until 9 months from now when that very big event, that lunar eclipse, is going to come along and will show the whole world that you're here. Mm-hmm. And what you need to be doing between now and then is feeding that website with content, finding new ways to attract new readers, that sort of
right.
thing.
Yeah, sort of rebuilding. It's almost like a time of revisitation in a retrograde motion in some way. I always think of the retrograde time as a time of revisiting, even though that's not equivalent to what we're talking about now. But it's the same concept of revising, revisiting, and give it another shot. There's always, I think that your words are encouraging for people if they hear that and understand that, we're talking about rolling the dice here again. Be patient. The times, I think if anything, people just become impatient, especially in times like this where many people are unemployed and the future really is uncertain. It's that agonizing wait that is so hard for many people. I know I get that from my clients all the time. They're sort of in this flux and they just can't understand it. And this is what it's all about.
And this is the year of impatience. I mean, all of that Aries focus with Jupiter and Uranus at 0 degrees of Aries,
mm-hmm.
that it's going to be very hard for us to say, but really, when? But
right, exactly. And then, of course, you got
about
Saturn.
That energy is that it acts like a match that lights the fire, mm-hmm. and it gets things going. It puts a fire under the pot, and things start to cook, and you actually get things off the ground that haven't been able to get off the ground in years. I know people that haven't had a job in years, and perhaps they were supposed to do their own business, invest in themselves, be an entrepreneur. That's all that Aries energy. And this is your year to do that. You've been out of work for so long so that you're forced to, use the talents, use your God-given talents and put that into something that you love to do. Reinvent yourself.
Well, I think that's a very wise thing. And, of course, I think that will be driven in ways that are responsible because we're going to have Mars and Saturn will be opposing that. So the Mars energy mixed with Saturn, I think, really is about driven to being responsible, driven to being accountable, and sort of, expanding within a contained manner so that you're not going, you're not throwing all of your life savings into it. You're sort of expanding in a contained manner so that it's a healthy expansion.
Yes. And I also see Saturn and Mars as commitment.
I think that's very good. Yeah. I like that.
That action, you're taking action and you're putting that action into a serious avenue. So you're committed. And I see that in people's charts, for instance, when, various things line up, like, say, Saturn on their Mars, transiting Saturn over their Mars, or, say, a Mars-Saturn midpoint or conjunction on their 7th house cusp, and they get married.
Yeah, I think it's very revealing. I think it's a great combination. I think commitment's a very good word for Mars and Saturn, and I think it's also I feel like it's a sense of restrained containment, rather than, as I said, if a financial basis, like you're trying to start a business, do it judiciously and scrupulously, so you're not, investing everything. So you have some sort of constraint there, I think.
Right. And know also that with all the Cancer Capricorn energy that is going on, and that's from the eclipses, that we will see an enormous amount of shift back and forth in the job sector, in the corporate world, and in our financial world. The currency, the U.S. dollar, is ruled by Cancer. That is going to show signs of shift as well. Mm-hmm. And, I think that there are times when, this is June, for instance, when we have that lunar eclipse at 4 degrees of Capricorn, there's probably going to be a very dramatic note in regard to the country, the direction that the country goes in.
I think it's going to be enormous because Pluto will be right there. I mean, it'll be conjunct Pluto at the same time.
Yes.
And that always means, when you've got Pluto there, it's almost as if there's it's a very profound change. And it could very well be that some of these new laws that they're talking about will go into effect, that will shift the fate of certain individuals. There's a lot of talk about sort of this redistribution of the wealth, which is sort of the next hot topic on the current administration's docket. And if that happens, there's some people who are going to be in for some rude awakenings when all these years that they've been coasting along with tax breaks are now nailed with serious taxes. But I think that the middle class for too long has taken on the burden, and perhaps this is the necessary shift we need.
Right. Moon phases are also fun for people who are dating. If they want to take their dating seriously or their search for dating seriously, I wouldn't start to look or go out to find someone under a new moon, but more likely between that first quarter moon and the full moon, when there's enthusiasm for other people also to be on the same page, and especially the full moon, you can both understand and see exactly what each other is about. All the cards are on the table. There are no hidden matters. Unlike when you meet someone under the influence of a new moon, there might be a lot of old stuff, a lot of hidden stuff the person doesn't want to talk about. Maybe there's a hidden relationship going on that they don't want to admit. Perhaps they're not ready. You don't have that same understanding that you have at the full moon when all the cards are on the table. So just those little tips about when is the best time. And I see people wanting to start businesses and get married on a new moon. And I say, no. If there's one thing I've learned in astrology, do nothing in the dark of the moon. And
except plants,
talk about
maybe.
this
It's okay to plant,
on my radio show that I do every single week. And I will talk about when there's the dark of the moon. It occurs a couple of days before the new moon and for a couple of days thereafter. And whenever I've made a decision or taken some type of action during that dark moon period, I've regretted it later and said, if I only waited a couple of days, I would have known this.
But don't you think that the new moon is a good time for planting? The farmers always plant on the new moon.
Yep, it's a good time for planting. It's you can take that type of action.
Well, I guess the action you're saying is it's more about perhaps setting your intention rather than taking the action. So if, like you were mentioned earlier about dating, you say maybe you wouldn't start out dating on the new moon, but you might put it in your mind saying something. In a couple of weeks or a couple of days, I'm going to start actively pursuing this. And so you would maybe set the intention at that point.
Right. But you wouldn't sign up for that dating internet site on the new moon. You would wait until the first quarter moon.
Okay.
Because
then you've got some light.
You're able to have more light on the subject. You want to be able to see the moon in the sky. So if you don't know, I don't know when the dark of the moon is, just go outside, see at night, and look to see if there's a moon in the sky. If there's no moon, then it's not time.
Yeah, most weather, almost every website in the world that has the weather will have the phases of the moon on there, so you can always track them. Matter of fact, if you go to my website, there's a lunar phase thing that tracks it on my website. It tells you exactly where the moon is all the time. And there's many sites that provide this information, so it's very widely available. NASA provides it. So
I have it on my website as well.
Yeah, it's very handy. It's just good to know these things because the moon, one thing about the moon that people probably don't understand, or maybe they haven't really understood that, is that the moon transits the month. Every month the moon moves through the whole cycle. So we're every day of the week we're going to be impacted at some point in time by the moon.
Exactly.
It's very real and tangible.
And the moon phase is what are the important days for the moon. The moon, when the sun and the moon are in aspect to one another in what is called a hard aspect, either a conjunction, a square, an opposition, or that last quarter square. And those are the important days for that moon cycle. So, and they're extremely powerful. Something always happens on a first quarter moon and on a last quarter moon, on the day of.
On the day of,
the president signed the bill on the day.
And that's by degree, typically by degree. Is that exact, isn't it?
It's that. Go ahead, say it again.
Usually it's typically on those days when they are squaring or opposing that it's by degree when that event happens.
Right.
Yes. In other words, so the sun and the moon are in a squaring degree, but it's by degree. So it's 15 degrees to 15 degrees or whatever, right?
Well, no, I don't quite understand what.
Well, what I'm saying is that when the sun is squaring the moon at a quarter moon or a last quarter moon,
right,
and events happen at those points, does the exactitude of the degree matter at that point?
Well, it matters for the event to happen. Yes, it matters for the quarter moon to actually happen. And what I'm referring to is that those are like real high action days. So those are the days when, yes, the exactitude of that aspect will set something off. It will trigger it. Unlike the new moon, when there's sort of this, applying a couple of days, it might happen a couple of days before the new moon, a couple of days after. Same thing with the full moon. The event may happen a couple of days before or after, not just on the day of.
Yeah. Well, it's those hard aspects that are always where the action is anyway in any chart, I think. I mean, I'm always encouraged by that, even though most people say, oh, God, don't look at my chart. At least my clients do. They always get worried when I say there's a square. But that's where the action is. That's where the lessons happen, and that's where the tension comes. It's not the soft angles that do anything for you. I mean, they're nice, but they're very, they're very blasé in some ways. They're very negligible. You hardly even feel them. But when there's tension...
But I push things through. You need a good square to make something happen.
Absolutely. And I think that's something that you should, be grateful that you have them, because those are the motivating factors in the chart. It's when that tension is there, it's that pinch point that when you see the action happening, especially I think more so with the squares than the oppositions, to be honest. But, it's just, it's what you're open to seeing in the chart. The moon has, and now with regard to predictive, let's talk a little bit about that. How can people use this wonderful tool of yours, and the way you've explained it is very interesting and succinct in your book. Dietrich Pessin's book is called Lunar Shadows 3, The Predictive Power of Moon Phases and Eclipses. It's available from her website, www.lunar-shadows.com, or from Amazon as well. And her last name is spelled Pessin, which you can see her picture and get to her website from my website, which is www.chrisflisher.com. Dietrich, so let's talk a little bit while we have a few minutes left here. We got about 6 or 7 minutes left to talk about the predictive power of what the moon can show us.
Well, if you had a copy of my book, you would have a section, a table in the appendix called Moon Families. And with these moon families, you would be able to target where things like let's say you want to look up when you started your company, and you wanted to see if there was anything coming up, in this time frame here. Let's say you started your company back 2 years ago or so. Let's say in September of 2007. And you would find on the page where there's moon families, right across the line, there are 4 moon phases, and you would read right across there to find the dates of the highest activity. So, for instance, if you started your business in September 07, you might see some development, stronger development. You may make a decision or have some kind of thing come up, June of 08. Then March 09, there may have been an important shift and change where you perhaps put something out there or partnered with someone or purchased some big thing for your company. And then December 09, you reaped the rewards of your efforts. So you started to see the money come in.
Mm-hmm. So I'm looking at that line right now, and all those degrees are all within Virgo. So they're all within about 2 or 3 degrees of Virgo.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct.
Mm-hmm. So it's always a return to that same sign.
Yeah, if you knew your chart, if you had a copy of your chart and you looked to see what type of Virgo planets you had, you could follow along knowing that those planets were the object of that eclipse that got your business going. Mm-hmm. Then you would know, you could find that eclipse in another section where the regular eclipses are listed. There's actually a section called the Metonic cycle groups, and there would be Virgo eclipses that you would find, and you'd look that up and find that there was a lunar eclipse. So that Virgo eclipse, I'm looking on in the Metonic cycle group. Where are we here?
You have September. There was one on September 11th. Was a bold one. Yeah.
Yeah. So we were looking at the one of 1997, was it? Was it 97?
You said 2007, yeah. Yeah, September 11th, 2007, and it was at 18 degrees Virgo, was the new moon. September the 19th of 2007 was 26 degrees Sag. Yeah.
This one's interesting because that was the last one in that particular Metonic cycle group, and that would have a new set of eclipses that will begin September of 2015, and you get a whole new set of life out of that, group, out of that particular degree group. So you'd be able to see when there are important times, important things to focus on about the future of your business or whatever it is, the subject matter.
The subject matter, yeah. Do you think that it's a good, could you use this as an investment tool? Do people come to you for that purpose?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm. And you get good results?
In investments, you have that 9-month cycle that's very important. And you definitely would notice the shifts, the rise and the fall of the various stocks and bonds to be obvious with that lunar gestation cycle. That's what it's called. It's the lunar gestation cycle, that 9-month interval.
Right, and so then if you look at this summer, when you were talking about the dollar, the fluctuating dollar, and I know that all these currencies are under duress right now, and we look back to 19 years, we would have seen about 1991, I guess, is around that time frame. And if I recall, that was a fairly volatile time. Nothing jumps out of my mind.
Don't you remember the economy was terrible, and that's why George Bush Sr. lost that election because the economy
that's right. It's the economy, stupid. Right, exactly.
Yeah.
How could I forget that?
Yeah. So that we're definitely in the renewal of that cycle. By the time we get through with this particular one, I think the economy should improved. I do think people expect by 2012 there to be a significant lift in the economy.
Yeah, I think we're right. So that is what's important to take away. We're running out of time, unfortunately. The time has flown by here as I predicted it would, and that had nothing to do with my ability to read the moon. I just knew the time was going to fly. But my guest today has been Dietrich Pessin. Her book is called Lunar Shadows 3, The Predictive Power of Moon Phases and Eclipses. It's available from her website, which is www.lunar-shadows.com. and also from Amazon. Her last name is Pessin. Her first name is Dietrich, Dietrech. And it's been wonderful. She's a wonderful astrologer, and she's available for consultations, as am I. And I think that, what the most important takeaway right here for people to remember is that we are in a cycle. Yes, it is a down cycle right now, but we also know that for every down cycle, there's going to be an up cycle, and that up cycle is coming. And to be patient and to hang in there and know that for every valley there's a peak, and we are just in the valley right now, but we're going to be coming to the peak soon. So thank you, Dietrich, for coming on today. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you. My pleasure. Thank you very much.
We'll get you back on. This is a wonderful topic. I think people can learn a great deal from the power of the moon. The moon is in our lives every day, and it's a wonderful thing to watch. So we'll talk to you next Saturday. April 3rd is when I'll be back. Bye.
You've been listening to Turning of the Wheel with your host, Chris Flisher. To schedule a reading with me or to order artwork, you may visit my website at www.chrisflisher.com. That's www.chrisflisher.com. Or email me, and you can call me at 978-264-0668. Thank you. And as always, be open to possibilities.